Hello and welcome to a No Wrong Choices Best of edition featuring one of our favorite conversations with the veterinarian, Dr. Amanda Pinder. I'm Larry Samuels. I'll be joined in just a moment by Tushar Saxena and Larry Shea. Before we bring Dr. Pinder in, please support our show by following or subscribing to it wherever you're listening right now. Let's get started. Now joining No Wrong Choices is the veterinarian, Dr. Amanda Pinder. Dr. Pinder is someone I recently met when visiting Atlantis in the Bahamas. At that time, she was the attending veterinarian who gave my group an amazing look behind the scenes. But since then, and literally by since then, I mean within the past few days, she chose to embark upon a new adventure, which I'm sure we will explore. Dr. Pinder, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Now, and by the way, just real quick, when Larry Sam says Atlantis, he doesn't mean the lost continent of. He means the resort in the Bahamas.
In the Bahamas.
Good clarification.
Yes. Yeah. Just want to make sure people know.
So before we start, I guess we should ask the question, are we going to be calling you Dr. Pinder, Dr. Amanda, Amanda? What is the appropriate thing we should call you throughout this conversation?
Amanda is fine.
Fair enough. Amanda, the way we like to lead into all of our conversations is to ask the person that we are talking to describe who they are in their own words. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's an interesting question right now because I'm transitioning roles. But obviously, I'm Amanda. I am a veterinarian. I've been a veterinarian for over 10 years. I've had a wide variety of experiences. Most recently, I was the attending veterinarian for Atlantis for just over 5 years, and that's the Atlantis Resort in Paradise Island, Bahamas. So my role there was taking care of a variety of species, bottlenose dolphins, California sea lions, macaws, green sea turtles, anything that swims, basically. I was responsible, for their care. And
I love that.
Yeah. So I just recently accepted a position at a equine facility, or a horse barn, basically, in layman's terms. And me and my husband are actually both veterinarians, so we're going to be working together and building, our own clinic, and providing hopefully a new level of care for the horses that live on the island here, as well as for other, all different types of species: dogs, cats, chickens, goats, whatever we get called for. We're always, willing to try and assist.
I love that. I get the fun part to take you back to the beginning. So I guess my first question is, what was it like growing up in paradise? Because you grew up in the Bahamas. I mean, that's amazing.
Yes, I know. It's one of those things where you don't realize how lucky you are until you leave, right? Because it's all I knew growing up. I'm very proud that I'm Bahamian. I'm 9th generation on my dad's side, and about 5th generation on my mother's side. So all of my family basically is, from here. Luckily, my parents really appreciate, the Bahamas as well. And so most of my childhood was spent enjoying this beautiful country and being able to go on the boat. And, we used to camp out on the beach, on the weekends, or, various different trips or whatever. So yeah, basically it was the dream growing up here. It was an amazing upbringing. I got to, be on the ocean all the time. And just so happens that I also grew up next to one of the only horse stables on the island. So I spent a lot of time, with horses as well.
So at what point in your childhood, in your formative years, did you finally say to yourself, you know what? I'm growing up in paradise here, and this is what I want to kind of do with my life. I want to take care of the biodiversity around me.
I think I'm that stereotypical story. I've always wanted to be a veterinarian. I have pictures, probably since I was, 3, 4, 5 years old, where it's like you dress up what you want to be when you grow up, and I'm wearing like a white coat and, pretend stethoscope. So as soon as I could walk and talk, I've just always been obsessed with animals, and it's always been my passion. So it's not really something that I can say one day I decided. It's like I always wanted to do this. And I've always been so involved with animals my entire life.
Did you have animals in your house growing up? I assume the answer to that is yes.
Yes, yes. We always had animals. I would say on average, 3 dogs, 3 cats.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Like I said, I lived close to the horse stable. So pretty much, my parents had to drag me home every single night in the dark because I would never want to leave. And so there were horses there, goats there, chickens, you name it. But yes, always had a lot of animals in the house growing up.
Do you have a favorite? Horses, maybe?
I don't know. It's hard to pick favorites, right? I mean, I've had so many amazing animals over the years. I love dogs. I'm definitely a dog person because you can do activities with the dog, you can take your dog, different places. And so when I was growing up, like I said, we always had a variety of dogs and I used to enjoy training the dogs. And so I used to do agility, we set up these courses in the backyard with jumps out of sticks and, you name
wow.
it. I probably, they probably were like running when they saw me coming, right? They're like, oh, she's back. She's back and she's setting up obstacles. Let's get out of here. So yeah, I spent all of my free time basically dealing with, and playing with our animals.
So you're that young and there's no eureka moment, but you know that this is the path that you're going to travel, basically. Mm-hmm. The first thing I always ask when it comes to either a doctor or vet, so you weren't squeamish at all? Like, did you really know what this entailed? Like blood and surgeries and, it's a hard road.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's definitely like a, weeding out process for a lot of people. A lot of people can't deal with that side of it. At a pretty young age, about 12, 13 years old, I started going into a veterinary clinic in the summers. And again, I think my parents were kind of hoping, they're like, oh no, she's not going to be able to handle it. Right. And I was like in there in the surgery, like totally unfazed. People were like other students that were my age, like, 13, 14 years old, they're passing out. And I'm just like, what do you want me to do next? So
Nice.
It never really was an issue, for me. I just totally was like trying to learn and absorb and just kind of understand everything that was going on.
So how did you focus those dreams and aspirations? 12, 13, you're working in different clinics. I assume you picked a college that was geared towards this. How did you pursue it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the hands-on experience was huge for me when I was younger, because obviously, you do need to know if you can handle doing surgery and
sure,
just seeing like if it is something that you want to do. So doing the various veterinary clinics, as well as, again, always being at the horse stables, that was a huge part of my life. And whenever we had veterinarians visiting to the island to deal with the horses, like specific surgeries and stuff, I was always there, helping or watching or whatever it was I can do at that time, whether I was 12 or 18 or whatever age it was. And then once I, obviously when I was applying to colleges, I went in knowing that, I wanted to go to veterinary school. So yeah, originally I always wanted to go to University of Florida, but interesting story, my guidance counselor did not send my transcripts. So they declined my application, and it was like it was a big deal for me then. I was 18 years old and I thought my life is over. I'm never going to go to vet school, whatever. Right? So I got University of Tampa, where I originally went, had a rolling admission. So I interviewed with them. They accepted me. And, obviously hindsight is everything. And I think that I'm very lucky that I went there first because it was a smaller university. And then I did end up transferring, to University of Florida because they have a stronger, pre-veterinary kind of animal biology program. But I think I would have been really overwhelmed if I went to University of Florida first because it's a large university. And like my graduating class had like 61 people.
Oh, geez.
So,
wow.
So
wow.
I was coming from, an island where everything is small, easygoing, you get to speak to all your your teachers all the time. And that's kind of how it was when I went to University of Tampa. It was, a little bit bigger, obviously, than my high school, of course, but, it was kind of like a stepping stone. So for me, at the time I was frustrated and I said, I really didn't want to, go there, but it was an amazing experience. And it was a nice transition, to, my next kind of adventure or opportunity at University of Florida.
So this is normally where I would say, were you a good student? But I'm going to skip that question because I don't think you could do this profession if you're not a good student. But I do want to ask you about how they approach the anatomy of all the different animals, because obviously a parrot is very different than a dog, which is different than a horse. A doctor has a human patient, and humans are relatively the same. You have gazillions of animals that you need to know their anatomy. How does that work?
Well, what I always tell people in general, and even like I get veterinary students that shadow me, it's like, you never stop learning, right? You can't get through all of these things in veterinary school. You just don't have the time, right? You focus on the primary species that you're going to see, the most of, which is typically dogs and cats, and then, a little bit of horses and, cattle and so on and so forth. But really and truly, you have to be motivated to figure and learn these things out on your own, because you just won't get it all in the, 8 years of education that you're going to get. And it's, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. So a lot of it has to be self-directed. And that's kind of how my life has been, interestingly enough, is that I've pivoted and I've kind of been in different roles. And then I've had to say, okay, I've got to put all my energy into this and make sure I'm learning about all the different nuances and intricacies. But that's what makes it, fun and challenging.
Did you have a mentor who then kind of took a shine to you and recognized the fact that, you had what it takes to make that next move?
Yeah, absolutely. So the veterinary clinic that I originally, started volunteering at when I was 12, I was still friendly with the veterinarian there. He's amazing veterinarian and was a huge mentor to me. He wrote my recommendations for veterinary school.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously for me, I didn't realize it, but from a very young age, I think he knew that I had potential. And so he did, I feel like, really put a lot of energy and time into explaining things with me, which is, it's just, you can't replicate someone like that. That's just so valuable to be able to have a mentor and someone who, think about it. I'm 12, 13. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Look, we say it all the time here. Mentors need mentors.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, who wants to talk to some 12-year-old, about all this, intricate things that they're doing in surgery? But he did. And he always took the time, to explain things to me when I had questions and show me things. And, so yeah, it was such a valuable experience for me. And I see him now and he's always so proud of me. And I'm so lucky that, I had him, as a mentor in my life at that time.
That's wonderful. I want to dig into the training a little bit more. So you go from the island to the University of Tampa. Mm-hmm. And, what is the training process for a veterinarian? Are you doing undergrad and then you're doing medical school? Like what is the training that you're going through?
Yeah, it's pretty similar to a medical school type situation. So you do your undergraduate. Most people, you can do, a variety of different options, depending on which veterinary school you're trying to get into. But most of them, you can do either general biology or animal biology. My path was animal biology. It's a little bit more specific. And, you can kind of get into the nitty gritty of, obviously horses, dogs, cats, whatever it is that your school is focusing on. And then you apply to veterinary schools. And that's obviously the most nerve-wracking process of the whole
Of
thing.
course.
It's extremely competitive, much more competitive than human medical schools, because there's so few schools that, that are in the United States and North America in general. So yeah, your chances of getting in, I think it's like, at my time, it was like 6 to 8% or something of people that apply get in.
Wow.
So, you just kind of go into it thinking like, well, I'm probably not going to get in, but, I'm going to give it my best shot. So for me, I can't even explain to you the day that I got called, it was just like, I couldn't believe it. because you get told so many times, well, you might not get in and you may not. And, believe it or not, you asked earlier about being a good student. I was a good student, but I wasn't a 4.0 student. I wasn't that like, I'm going to study all day and stay up all night. It was like, I always wanted to find balance in my life. So it's like, I would study and be like, you know what, I'm going to go horseback riding. I want to go
Right.
take my dog to the dog park. And so, yeah, maybe if I studied more and I didn't have balance, then I would have had that 4.0. But, I still felt like, I was able to do it and be a well-rounded person. And then luckily the school that I applied to saw that. They saw I had all these different experiences. I was the captain of my riding team. I volunteered at the shelter. I started a shelter club at University of Florida where we could all get together and help local, shelters, with volunteering or whatever, so there were so many other things that I tried to do to make an impact with others versus just focusing on, studying all the time.
All right. So you're saying you're telling us that a very small amount of people get into a very small amount of schools when it comes to veterinary sciences. So if that's the case, and you were initially saying to yourself, "Well, I may not get in," what was the plan B?
There really wasn't a plan B. I was determined. I was like, okay, if I don't get in this year, I'll try again next year. Maybe I'll get a master's degree in, equine science or, equine nutrition or something like that, and then try again. There really wasn't, a plan B, because that's all I had, focused on, for most of my life. And yeah, I just wasn't going to take no for an answer.
I love that. But I never really even thought about the fact that there's so many fewer schools and it's so much more difficult than a medical school because there's medical schools all over the place. That's just really interesting. I guess when you get into veterinary school, I mean, my first question would be, my patient can't talk to me. How do I figure out what's wrong with them? Like, is that what they're teaching you? Like literally, like class 101 of vet school, figure out what the problem is,
Who is your Dr. Dolittle?
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. It's a good question. I remember first year, we actually had a lot of client communication classes because a lot of it too is like a lot of veterinarians come in and they're like, I just want to work with animals. And I think, at the beginning, you kind of forget you need to be able to speak to people and you need to be able to communicate with them and ask the right questions, because also too, yes, you can't speak to your patients. So how do you extract the information that you need from the owner? And in the case of, say Atlantis, where I worked for the last couple of years, we rely heavily on the trainers or the behaviorists, and those persons have a very close relationship with the animals and they're interacting with them, all day. So what are the questions that you ask to get the information? How's the animal been acting? What is it doing after it eats? Is it throwing up after it eats? What is kind of going on? And obviously just developing your clinical skills, obviously, as well, is extremely important. Doing a good, physical exam and being able to, interpret, your findings and then, go on from there.
Do people specialize going through that process, or it's really just not a thing?
People do specialize. Yes, absolutely. So there's tons, there's more and more specialties being established. Obviously, in human medicine, most of those specialties have long been established. But in veterinary medicine, some of them are still being, in terms of like the colleges that are going to accredit people to get certain specialties, some of them are still being developed. But there's like veterinary radiologists, veterinary ophthalmologists, veterinary internal medicine, small animal, veterinary internal medicine, large animal. So yeah, there's quite a few specialties. And it was something that I considered, but, that's another 4 years of training. So, for me, I just decided, I want to kind of get in there and kind of figure out where I fit in and go from there. And luckily for me, it worked out. But I have a lot of amazing friends that specialized and, they get to do what they love as well. Just ophthalmology, for example. I'm actually going to be doing some ophthalmology exams with our ophthalmologist tomorrow. So he's been a great mentor and friend to me as well. So yeah, there's lots of different specialties.
Tushar asked about a plan B. I find it so daunting. You talk, I think you said 8 years of school at the highest level. There was never a doubt or a discouragement or I maybe need to do something else because this isn't going to work out. It sounds like you were obviously pretty determined, but there must have been a point where you're like up against the wall, like, I don't know about all this.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's how I would feel.
Absolutely. There were times where I did not think that it was going to work out. I do like to tell this story because I think people think that, again, academically, if you got into vet school and you're doing so well in your career, that you must have just breezed through. It really wasn't like that for me. I had setbacks. One in particular that I always tell is that I failed organic chemistry. And I thought...
Not the first.
Exactly.
I imagine I would too. I'm going to take that for granted.
So yeah, I passed organic chemistry 1, and then I failed organic chemistry 2. And, to be honest, the professor was tough, and I would go to his office and I still remember to this day, he told me, you will never get into veterinary school.
Oh, wow.
I always talk about that. I'm like, I'm going to find him one of these days. And
yeah, definitely.
But,
look at you now.
Yeah, exactly. Look at all the things that I've done and, all that I've saved. But yeah, that was a huge turning point for me. That was my sophomore year of undergrad. And I thought, there's just no way I failed this class. Again, my life is over. I'm never going to get into vet school. They're going to see that and they're going to say, no, she can't do it. If she failed organic chemistry, she can't go to veterinary school. But, I just had to, again, pivot and say, I'm going to try this again. It's okay to be upset and to be disappointed and whatever, but then find a solution. Okay. I went and I got a personal one-on-one tutor for organic chemistry. When I took it again, I said, under no circumstances can I fail this class. And she was like, all right, we're going to have to meet 3 hours a week, every week. And this is what we're going to do. And we came up with a plan and I passed. So.
And you got where you wanted to go. So as you work your way through the program, it's 8 years. I think we've clarified from college and then through veterinary school. Mm-hmm. So as you're nearing the end, what do you do? What is the game plan? What is the approach to landing that first opportunity and becoming a vet, being Dr. Pinder?
Yeah, exactly. Right? So in your final year, sometimes even in your third year of veterinary school, which I guess would be year 7 or 8, you would start doing what we call externships, which is basically you go and you visit, and it's kind of like a working interview, right? Sometimes you're not going to work there in the long term. Maybe you're just going to a specific place to get experience. But a lot of times you're going, because hey, I might apply for an internship here once I graduate. And so basically that's what I did. I just did quite a few externships in my last 2 years of veterinary school. And then I decided upon, my top 3 or 4 choices where I wanted to go for my internship. And I just made it clear when I went to my top choice, I said, this is my top choice. This is where I see myself doing my internship. And, I hope that you guys would, see the value in me and see that I'm a hard worker. And yeah, luckily for me, I was able to get that internship that I wanted and gain that valuable experience.
So where was that? And you had the good fortune of actually being in those, rooms basically prior to this. So how different was it when you started getting into that externship and seeing what the day-to-day was like there compared to what you knew from, vet school, basically?
Yeah, it's very different for sure. Vet school, your head's kind of spinning, right? You're just like, there's so much going on. You're trying to absorb so much information. You may not be appreciating all the little kind of details. Again, sometimes it's like the client communication and discussing finances and like all those other things that you have to then jump into day one of, being a licensed veterinarian. So it's a very nerve-wracking transition going from student to doctor. It's like, hi, I'm the doctor. oh, really? I'm the doctor. Okay, I got to do this now.
You have to check yourself
It's
a
like,
little bit there. Hey, I am the
yeah,
doctor.
I am, and so that's kind of how it is. The first, I feel like, couple months, you're just like, what's happening? You're just trying to wrap your head around all of it. But choosing a place that had, good mentors was obviously huge to me. And luckily for me, the hospital that I chose, which was Hollywood Animal Hospital in Hollywood, Florida, also, strangely enough, had a lot of connections to some of the veterinarians that I knew back in the Bahamas. So it was kind of this, again, connection with, oh, I've known so and so who you've worked with for 20 years, and it just felt right to me, and I felt like that was going to be the best place where I would probably fit in and get the most valuable experience.
So you always had an eye on going back home, going back to the Bahamas.
Yep. My original plan was to stay for a couple of years in the US and work. But because I'm Bahamian and I'm not American, I basically I had to enter into a lottery system, the H-1B, the J-1 visa lottery system. And it is literally a lottery. And so you would think, someone who has advanced education or whatever, it wouldn't be that way. But, that's the way it was at the time. I'm not sure how it is now. And yeah, I tried, 2 years in a row because I wanted to get more experience in the US before moving back home. And it didn't work out. But again, I just feel like it's one of those things where it wasn't meant to work out, and that's okay. And it led me to doing my own business and then working for Atlantis, which were both, amazing experiences for me. So I don't regret any of those things kind of happening.
No wrong choices.
That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
That's what this
Literally.
is all about.
No wrong choices. Exactly.
Yeah.
We usually find a way to plug that in every conversation. Thank you for making that natural. So you go back, you go back home, and what are you doing? If I remember correctly from us talking, did you set up your own practice when you came back?
Yes, I did. I did work for a clinic, for a couple months, just, trying to get my feet on the ground. And then, me and one of the veterinary technicians that I worked with at Hollywood Animal Hospital, we would always joke, like, oh, we're going to start this business. It's going to be like, we'll come to you by boat, by plane, whatever. We're going to make it to you. We're going to treat your animals. And so we had this joke for the whole year of my internship. And then when I moved back home and I started seeing that, there really is a need for this. I just pivoted and I said, this is what I'm going to do. And, my parents at the time were a little concerned because I had not really made any money. I'd been in school, for such a long time and, didn't have like a bunch of savings or anything. They're like, you sure you want to start your own business? Like, it's kind of a big risk. And, but I did. And I struggled, at the beginning. But again, because it's such a small community, I would say after maybe 2 to 3 months, I was busy. I didn't have days where I sat and did nothing, and I think that goes back to the community that I live in and where I'm from, is that everything's kind of word of mouth. And, I think people knew me, for example, from the horse stables and from various different, animal activities that I've done over the years on the island. And so it just kind of, people were like, oh, Amanda's doing her own thing. Great. Let me call Amanda and she'll come out and deal with the animals here. And people love it.
When you say you got busy, what does that mean that you got busy? Like, are you basically kind of working like 24 hours a day at that point? Or is it that, there is some downtime?
No, there's definitely downtime. I would say I was working 5 to 6 days a week, maybe, 9, 10 hours a day.
It's amazing.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it was jam-packed. And also because I was driving and doing the mobile kind of house to house. I mean, you can realistically, you can't see as many patients in a day as you could if you were in a clinic, right? Because everyone's coming to you. So, I'd average anywhere from 5 to 8 house calls, depending on how many animals they had at each, location. So yeah, it was busy. I came home every night and I was going to bed at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I can't imagine getting started like that. And you must be growing at that point exponentially in terms of knowledge and experience. But I want you to talk a little bit, because we touched upon it, but didn't really talk about it, about the self-confidence that you need to make these calls, to make these decisions. I mean, there are lives on the line in most of these instances. You are the last line of defense. An animal needs you. You have to make the call on how to handle a sick animal, a hurt animal, whatever the case may be. How confident are you? Is it something that you had to work on and grow with, or did it come naturally? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely is something that for me, it evolved over time. I mean, I've always been pretty outspoken and social, and, I've always loved, hanging out with my friends and, kind of being out and about. So for me, I do enjoy having relationships with people. So I would say that does come somewhat naturally to me. And that's obviously a huge part of being a veterinarian is, again, communication and being able to do that. And I think coming with that comes with, you have to be comfortable and confident enough to say, like, sometimes I don't know, I don't know. Yeah. And that's something that we do have to say, somewhat frequently, because again, our patients can't speak to us. They can't say, oh no, you gave me the wrong thing. I still hurt, or, you can run all the diagnostics and you don't find anything, wrong. So sometimes you can say, I've done all this and, I just don't have a clear answer at this point. And that's okay. I think people appreciate, the honesty versus scrambling and trying to come up with something that doesn't actually make sense,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's something that I've always said to, other students that I've mentored, is that don't be afraid to say, I'm not sure. It's not always a negative thing, especially if you've done your due diligence, you've done all the tests, you've done everything. That does happen sometimes. And you just have to be comfortable enough to, communicate that, whether it be to a client or an owner or whoever.
To that end, what sticks with you more? Great success or great failure?
Oh boy. That's a good question.
I know that's a tough one. I had to throw it in somewhere though. Come on. It's a big part of what you do,
Yeah.
right? Is how hard is it to turn the page if something goes wrong? Mm-hmm. And how much do you want to take the buoyed experience of, look at what I did over here. I just saved a life, or I just, something like that.
Yeah, I think at the beginning, you really take your failures with you. I have to be honest, right? It's like you have spent your whole life, especially like for me, I spent my whole life being devoted to animals. And then when you have, a lot of times it's not things within your control. Something happens to a patient of, an amazing client, and you're just like, it's all you can think about. You're just like, how could this happen? We did everything we could, and, this animal passed away. And yeah, I mean, I can't lie. The first time I had a really good client's pet, I mean, I thought about it for months. It was something that definitely was challenging, for me to move forward from. But over the years and through various, different techniques and whatever, you learn to leave these things behind, because, you don't want to carry only negative things, because there's so many positive things that we get to do in our career, and so many animals that we've helped. But yeah, it can definitely weigh heavily on you, for sure.
Knowing where you're based in the Bahamas and knowing the type of roles that you've had, have you been involved with the rescue of an animal that has been a standout experience for you, a really special experience?
Yeah, absolutely. My original kind of entrance into marine mammal medicine with the stranding network in conjunction with Atlantis was the stranding of a Atlantic spotted dolphin, whom we named M&M, and found out later on that he was already documented as Lambda. Basically, this dolphin stranded in the Berry Islands, which is another set of islands in the Bahamas, north of Nassau, where I live. And I had just literally signed up 2 weeks prior to say, I want to volunteer. I want to help. Let me know what's going on, and, I'll make myself available. And so 2 weeks later, they call me, a dolphin stranded. He's on a beach in the Berry Islands. Can you come? I said, sure. Called on my clients, explained to them. They're like, oh my God, please go help. So I go.
I'm going to save dolphins.
Yeah, exactly. They were like totally fine with it. They're like, Fluffy can wait for his vaccines. Go save the dolphin. So I went and anyway, long story short, I was able to learn how to get a blood from a dolphin and give an injection to a dolphin, all of those things that I had never had the experience of. And again, you don't get that in veterinary school, as one can imagine. Dolphins aren't patients that come into a hospital routinely. So I got to learn a lot on this animal and assist with rehabilitating him and getting him back out into the ocean. After about 60 days, he was released. Now, the crazy part about this story, which is literally, I'm never going to be able to top this story ever again in my career, is we then, years later, I believe it was 4 years later, me and my husband are in the area, in that kind of Barrier Islands or Bimini area where we know those particular dolphins live. And we go there. I said, wonder if we're going to see Eminem. Let's go out on the boat and try and, do like a dolphin, tour where they take you to try and look for the dolphins. We go out on this boat, 20 minutes in, we see a pod of dolphins. We get in the water. Eminem swims right up to me.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
There you go. There you go.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Make this up. I have goosebumps now. I've told this story 100 times and it still is just the most incredible experience. I can't explain to you. I mean, the way I was screaming, the boat driver thought I was drowning because he didn't know what was going on. I was just screaming at the top of my lungs. It's Eminem.
Not good to do in the water. Don't do that in the water. Too many people have seen Jaws.
They thought I was like being attacked by a shark, And
Oh my God.
luckily, my husband was there and he's an avid underwater photographer. And so we got photos. Basically he has this distinct hole in his dorsal fin from where his satellite tag was, since, it's since dropped off, but he has a very distinct scar on his dorsal fin. And yeah, he swam right next to me. And we have photos of that. And I can't even explain to you what it's like to save an animal like that, put it back in the ocean, and 4 years later, see this animal. And then it gets better. We get back to Atlantis. I tell my boss, I say, this is what happened. And we look at the date. It was 4 years exactly to the date that he stranded.
Wow. Come
That's
on.
amazing.
I can't make it up. That's what I'm saying.
That's
It's
amazing.
almost like a
That's
birthday, for
amazing.
God's sakes. Yeah.
Really insane
Wow.
story. And just like, that's the story. What, I tell people, it's like, that's the type of experience that makes all of the stress worth it. Right. Like, you worry about your patients so much. You want them to do well. And, especially when you're dealing with this magnificent animal, you're putting it back in the ocean. You're like, oh my goodness, I hope nothing bad happens to you. I hope you live an amazing life. And he did. And he's, we think he's still out there. We went back a year later and we did get some video footage with, a whole video crew and everything. We got to see him again, luckily, on the third day. We were there for 3 days. The first 2 days, no go. And the third day, in the final hour, he showed up. So we got to get some amazing footage.
Amazing.
Did he approach again?
Yes. Yeah. He came right up to us. He was with a bigger pod this time. So it was, a little bit more of excitement going on.
Yeah.
It was a
What a great
moment.
Yeah.
Different experience from the
Yeah.
first time because it was just me and my husband in the water. And it was
Right.
there was nobody out there. It was a flat, calm day. It was just like the water was glass and it was just quiet, just us and the animals. Yeah, you can't replicate anything like that.
Yeah, I asked you before about the highest of highs and the lowest
That's
of
the highest
lows.
of high.
There it is,
Yeah.
right
Nothing
there.
can top that.
Nothing can top that. So let's talk about the transition from your own practice to Atlantis, because I know, from what I understand, you were volunteering for the Atlantis stuff, and that's how you got out to help this M&M, the spotted
Yes.
dolphin. And how does that transition to a position later on? Is it just because they knew you and they're like, "Hey, it's open. We know you. We trust you. Come on aboard."
Yeah, it wasn't quite as quick as that. Obviously, it was a more gradual process. So once they saw my interest in this particular animal, M&M, they saw that, I was coming in, I was learning, trying to, be as adaptable as possible. my boss was like, are you interested? Like, would you be interested in a position here? Because we could probably use someone part-time, to fill in when the other veterinarian, is, on vacation or whatever. And I was like, I mean, obviously I'm interested, So it kind of started with that. And I balanced doing my mobile veterinary practice. And then I started with 1 day a week for probably the first like 6 to 8 months. And then I went up to 2 days a week and then 3 days a week. And then, like I said, did pretty much increase my time over 2 years before then was offered the full-time position, which also coincided with me and my husband getting married. And luckily, my husband is also a veterinarian. So then he was able to take over the house.
Oh,
Look at that.
right.
Okay,
Yeah,
very
it
nice.
all kind of worked out. And I, because I think too, it was like one of those things where we're having discussions where it was like, oh, well, my husband is moving here and we're trying to figure out what he's going to be doing. And then it was like, well, would you want to be full-time? And I was like, yeah, if you guys want me to be full-time, like that could work. And then, my husband can take over the business. And it was a gradual transition from kind of the mixed animal mobile practice and then getting more experience in the aquatic kind of world and then taking it on full-time.
All right, so then I guess my question will be about the transition in that case, right? So obviously, the most obvious difference is that the animals in Atlantis, or those you're dealing with there, they're in the water all the time. That's their life, and so you're transitioning from those that are on the land to those that are in the water. What is that transition? I mean, what does that entail for your own mindset then to see like, okay, I'm still dealing with mammals, but they're in an entirely different environment from where I am normally used to.
Yeah, it's a huge transition. I would say it was big. It was a big transition for me. And I think that obviously when you're dealing with house calls, you come in, you're like, all right, Fluffy, let me examine you. And, you do what you need to do. Whereas when you're dealing with, especially marine mammals, that
The house is the Caribbean Ocean for that.
right, exactly. when you're dealing with intelligent animal, like, marine mammal, like a bottlenose dolphin or, a sea lion, you have to exercise patience because everything that, especially in a facility like Atlantis, is done through positive reinforcement training, right? And so the animals are trained to be able to give, the behaviors that you need to, say, get a blood or to do an ultrasound or whatever it is. So, sometimes it's like you're having to plan these things weeks in advance. Like, okay, we want to do this on this particular animal. Now you guys have to kind of take it and start the training. So it's so much different from, the other types of medicine that I was doing prior to coming, and really just having to understand the whole operation and how everything works. But I would say it was such an amazing experience to see how much time and energy goes into training these animals and how intelligent they are, and how you don't, even from now I'm transitioning back, to doing, more small animal and, different things with horses. And I think that the experience that I have has taught me that exercising patience, with these animals is extremely important, because it makes it a positive experience for them as well. We don't want them to be, it's like that famous thing, like the vet comes in, all, the dogs are cowering and the cats are trying to run away, right? And I think that it's really changed my whole approach on how I think about veterinary medicine and how I think about my patients in terms of making everything a positive experience. And sometimes taking your time and saying, okay, Fluffy's stressed out today. We can't get the blood right now. Let's pivot and figure out how we can, do it better, maybe in a different scenario. Whereas before, without having this experience with the marine mammals, I don't think I think about it the same way. I think it was definitely different.
As a vet, you're developing a rapport and a relationship with obviously your customers and your clients, but also with the animals. When you're at Atlantis, it feels like it's a very different job where you are the face of this incredible facility where you are interacting with all of these different guests. You are presenting what Atlantis is doing in the most wonderful light possible. How much of an adjustment was that for you?
Yeah, I think it was a huge adjustment. I think the reality is that there's a lot of negative press on marine mammals under human care. And I think it mostly comes from misinformation and also just lack of education. As well as I always say to people, not all facilities are created the same. Atlantis is accredited by many different bodies, and we hold our standards to the highest level, right? So most people, I think, don't understand the level, of care that goes into these animals. And so I think that when I transitioned, like, to me, it made sense. But then, when you present that information to the public, you need to make sure that you're presenting it in a way where it's like, you're not just going to get someone's not going to take one soundbite and they're going to be like, oh, these animals are living in a prison or whatever, you know what I mean? Like they'll take something.
Because you became an advocate in a way.
Correct. Yeah. And like I said, there's a lot of criticism, kind of in this field. So you do have to think before you talk and make sure that, you're not going to say something that somebody can spin around and say, well, you said this, but really, obviously, you meant something different. So yeah, it took practicing and, probably driving, my husband insane, talking about things at home, talking about things at work. Obviously, I leaned a lot on my coworkers who have been there much longer than me, and have used to, the PR aspect of, having to answer questions about the animals and stuff. So for sure, it wasn't something that I took on, on my own. I definitely relied a lot on others to help guide me and, make sure that I wouldn't put my foot in my mouth.
What are your feelings then on, let's say, as you said before, and I agree with you, I think that the notion of having like the average person, like the three of us, interact with these animals, interact with these fish, it's paramount to kind of understand, get a better idea on the world we live in. Obviously, there has been and was a tremendous amount of controversy, let's say, around a place like SeaWorld. You obviously were the head of a large facility, not as big, maybe not as big as that, but as you said, you kind of had to advocate for that. So what are your feelings on places, let's say, like SeaWorld? I mean, are aquariums or large-scale water aquatic facilities, aquariums, etc., are they as important as zoos for the average public to kind of wrap their head around and kind of see the world they live in?
Absolutely. I think the thing that unfortunately never, it's just like with any news and media, certain things are always shared more because it evokes more of an emotion, I guess, or a response from people. And, the thing about places like SeaWorld, Georgia Aquarium, I mean, there's so many amazing facilities that, I mean, they do so much, they can't even put all of it out there, into the universe. I mean, they are rescue and rehabilitating manatees, sometimes whales, sometimes, I can't even begin to list the amount of things, that they're involved in, as well as they are advancing medicine in this field, which we don't know everything, right? And we're learning stuff every day. So they're doing studies on how a dolphin processes certain medications. And so that way, when there's a mass stranding event and people need to assist, we have a baseline of what we need to be doing, because again, there's so much that we don't know. So I think I could talk about this for hours because there's so many things that, so many different areas that you can touch on, but the role of these facilities is, you can't even measure it. And I think that it's unfortunate that so many people think of them in a negative light, but without them, who is going to rescue and rehabilitate these animals that need assistance?
And advocate for them.
Yeah, and advocate for them. There will not be, it's not going to be a good situation, if we don't have these facilities to educate people and continue their conservation efforts.
I read one of the most common misconceptions about veterinarians is that you guys are all wealthy. Everybody makes $1 million.
Yes.
Because as far as I'm concerned, whatever you get paid is not enough because we need you. But I guess, would you find that to be true? I mean, I think about taking my pets to the vet, and it's a lot of money. But I think it's a misconception. I think most veterinarians are just happy to help. It's a job and they do well, but you're all not millionaires, and you should be, in my opinion.
It goes to gas money. They're always on the move.
Yeah, it is a career of passion. I will definitely say that.
Yeah.
I remember, depending on where you would work, like, so for example, when I worked in South Florida, you get these really emotional, heated kind of clients. They come in and you're like, okay, here's the estimate for so-and-so. And, it's going to be $1,000 to do this emergency procedure or whatever. And they're like, how do you sleep at night charging all this money? And you're like, I'm sorry, I barely have a bed to sleep on. Okay. At this point, so you have to pay all the staff, you have to pay the electricity, you have to pay for all the supplies. I mean, there's so many things to running a business. People just never think about it in human medicine because it's subsidized either by private insurance or, government assistance, right? And so when people get animals, I think they commonly forget that it is a privilege in many places in the world to have an animal because it is expensive to provide care. Just if you were to have to pay cash for your hospital bills for yourself, you would be paying.
You'd be saying the same thing that your doctor, right?
You would be paying. I mean, I got a bill once, I remember, for an endoscopy, and for some reason, there was a mix up with the insurance. They sent me a bill for like $16,000. I'm like, we should start charging more for our endoscopies. We only charge like $1,000.
Did you call the hospital up and say, how can you people sleep at night?
Yeah, exactly. Right? So yeah, it is definitely something that within the veterinary community, we do experience a lot, that people say, how can you charge this much? This is my child. And it's, this is my baby. This is my dog. And it's like, unfortunately, we all have to pay bills. And it's not even like, again, we're not millionaires. We're not making what the plastic surgeon makes, at the, Mount Sinai or whatever, whatever fancy hospital. We're just trying, to have a decent life and do something that we're passionate about. So yeah, it's a hot topic in veterinary medicine.
Well, speaking of possibilities, you are pursuing a new one as you are transitioning away from Atlantis to establish your own practice, or I believe. What are you going to do next? Talk to us a little bit about your next adventure.
Yeah. So basically, I'm kind of having a full circle moment. And me and my husband were approached to manage a equine facility, basically a horse stable just for private owners, with also the goal of opening the first equine hospital in the Bahamas.
Wow.
So,
really? Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. So if I go back to kind of, again, circling back to when I was applying to veterinary school, when I wrote my essays, saying what my goals were, my goal was to be the first Bahamian equine veterinarian. And then when I moved home, I thought, I don't know if I can make enough and make a living, doing just the horses. So, I'm going to mix it up and do everything. And obviously, like we already discussed, it went well. Now we have a group of individuals that, are bringing in very high level horses that they want to be able to provide the very best care. And in order to do that, you can't take a horse into a small animal hospital. You have to build a hospital that can fit horses.
Yeah.
Similar to what, we have like at Atlantis, we had to build a hospital that can fit dolphins and sea lions. So yeah, this is going to be obviously an exciting journey where hopefully we will be able to provide very high level care for horses on the island, as well as, other animals as well. But in the case of an emergency, being able to do a surgery on a horse is a huge deal. And right now in the Bahamas, and there's never been any facility in the Bahamas that's ever been able to do that. So that's what we're planning on creating.
Wow.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, Amanda, I mentioned a moment ago, you are the closest thing that we will ever speak. You are the closest person we will ever speak to as a real life Dr. Doolittle. So, my question to you is this: which animal, first land and then aquatic, most expressive?
That's a good question. I feel like land, I would say dogs are pretty expressive. That would be my first instinct. There are other animals too, but if I had to choose one, it seems like you're backing me into a corner and I have to choose one.
I'm backing you into a corner.
Dogs on land, and in the ocean, I would say dolphins, bottlenose dolphins.
Really? I actually thought you'd say sea lions, to be honest with you. I thought you'd say sea lions.
Dolphins are, yeah, they're pretty expressive. They have a lot of personality. Sea lions do as well, but in a different way. So yeah, I would say if I had to choose one, I would choose dolphins.
Okay, I'll follow up with that. I don't know if you know the author Douglas Adams, British author, wrote a bunch of fiction. Doesn't matter. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, bunch of
Thanks
other
for all
books.
the fish.
He talks in his book about how humans are third smartest species on the planet, with dolphins being second and white mice being first because they lead us to all experiments and control our behavior and things like that. In your opinion, smartest animal in the world is?
Yeah, I think I would say bottlenose dolphins. They're pretty
Bottlenose dolphin.
They're pretty intelligent.
There you go.
Yeah, they're pretty intelligent.
Are you biased at all? You've been dealing with it for a while. Are you biased at all?
Biased. You know what? Maybe you guys will catch up with me in 5 years and I'll be working with like bats or something random, you know? And that's the cool part about this job, is that you can kind of continue to pivot and explore new kind of avenues. But yeah, I'm going to stick to my answer. Dolphins.
And we're behind them, by the way. We're third.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
No, I love that. I have a pin that I got that says "Thanks for all the fish" from that.
There you go.
There you go. There you go.
You do
Another
know
fan.
Douglas Adams.
That's,
right. Very
we love
good.
that. We love to sing that song at work.
Perfect.
So, Amanda, if somebody is listening who is a young woman, a young man who aspires to become a veterinarian and wants to get to a similar place to where you've wound up or where you find yourself today, what would you tell them?
I would say the relationships that you make with people are extremely important. We get into this field because we love animals, but again, I'm having a full circle moment right now. And I do believe that it's because of the strong relationships that I have with people that I've made, along the way for whatever reason. And, secondly, is that I think experience is the most important thing, and exposing yourself to as many things as you can, along the way is extremely important. When I was graduating high school, I did an externship at a dolphin facility. I did an externship at a swine operation. I did different equine or horse, activities. So, I always try to kind of have a broad kind of spectrum of activities that I was doing, so that I felt like I would be more well-rounded and, be able to have different experiences even before, I went into veterinary school.
It's great advice. Well, Amanda, I'm so glad that I tracked you down and that we convinced you to join us today. I've learned a ton. I'm so excited for what you have in front of you, and I think the three of us are just
we want to know more.
We can't wait for the next chapter.
Keep knowing more.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
So that was Dr. Amanda Pinder, who I had the good fortune of meeting, and I, of course, was foolish enough not to get her number at the time, but eventually chased down after the fact to convince to join us today. And what a great story. Larry Shea, what are your takeaways?
I'd learned so much, I think, is the biggest thing I take away from it, right? I never really thought about the fact that there's medical schools all over the place, and everybody wants to go to medical school. It's a very stressful process, but there's even fewer veterinarian schools, right? So I was shocked, that 6 to 8% chance of her actually being accepted to these schools. I mean, I think that's fascinating, first and foremost. She always wanted to be a vet, right? She's a 12-year-old child or even younger dressing up like a vet. And I don't think we've ever really had something like that. But the fact that somebody let her in a surgery and took her under their wing and kind of taught her at such a young age, I mean, it's very rare that you go into a profession at that age, especially, and that's the straight path, right? And you go, and she said it herself, it's a career of passion, and her advice was great, you know, and we say it all the time, relationships matter, and get experience. You know, we can't say it enough. Not everybody is fortunate enough to be able to offer your time, but if you could do an internship and offer your time, you're going to get a lot out of it, because that's how a lot of these professions work.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I was also surprised by the fact that, you know, and you said it too, is that how few veterinary schools there are out there, and that she didn't have a plan B. The plan B was, I'll just reapply a year later if I have to. Right? Essentially, I'll just sleep on somebody's couch for a year so I'll reapply again. Which is amazing. And, you know, we always talk about the notion of mentors need mentors, right? So we always talk about that as well. And that, yes, that being able to not only prove yourself when you go to an internship, but prove yourself to the point where the people who are in charge see something in you, and then they go out of their way to nurture that. That's amazing to me. And she has been so successful. I am so jealous of that type of a profession, because, I mean, you know, I don't think I had that kind of stamina in me to say at a young age, this is what I want to do with my life. And then to not only do that, but to pursue it with such a focus that down the line, not only do you become that in her case a veterinarian, but become the head of one of the biggest resorts in the world, that she then becomes a teacher for everyone else who steps into this arena. It's amazing.
Yeah, you know, and as you say that, one of the things that really struck me was the smile that was so clearly coming through during the entire conversation.
She loves her job. She loves her job.
She loves what she does. Yeah.
She loves her job. She figured it out very early, and nothing has changed. And it comes across so clearly. So one of the things that I wanted to dig into as part of the conversation was about advocacy. And in a way, at that type of a facility, you are a spokesperson. You are a PR person for that type of resort facility, whatever word I'm looking for. And she is an advocate. So whether she wanted to be or not, she was thrust into a position where she needed to kind of figure it out. How do I communicate? How do I engage with others? But it was natural, because it's who she is, the passion, the love, the drive that she's had her whole life. There's nothing inauthentic about any aspect of her. It really struck me as something truly remarkable and admirable.
And the story about her saving that spotted dolphin, I mean, just the reward that she must get from doing something like that, from helping another animal survive and thrive in the ocean after it had beached itself. I mean, she said it herself. You're never going to get another story like that. I mean, it's 1 in a billion, right?
Exactly.
Well, maybe now she'll get one that involves a horse. So with that, Dr. Amanda Pinder, thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
Our apologies for the slight technical glitch at the end there. If you enjoyed the conversation, please be sure to follow the show and connect with us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. You can also discover some great bonus content about our guests by visiting our website at NoWrongChoices.com. On behalf of Larry Shea, Tushar Saxena, and me, Larry Samuels, thank you so much for joining us.